Hello there, it's Deborah,
And James.
and we're here again in the treehouse to chat with you today. And
Is it Wifey Wednesday?
yeah, I'm really uncertain if I like that description, but here we are.
I know people are connecting to it. I don't know.
Yeah,
We'll have to
Wifey, we'll see. Let us know what you think of it. Anyhow, I had an idea for a topic today.
What is it?
And that is something that you talk about often in your regular treehouse talks. And it's around this idea of self-awareness. And I was thinking about self-awareness and how it relates to relationships, not just intimate partner relationships, but friendships, because I know I personally am working on a lot of things that I've become aware of that I do in relationship, not just with you, but with friends, and things that I notice with communication with friends that comes up for me. And you and I tend to, I like to bounce things off of you and process those things together. So I thought what we could do is talk about what these sort of triggers and issues are around, I'm going to just say, when I'm less than self-aware, when I'm noticing that in others, how it makes me feel, how to improve it, and maybe what you notice, and in how you've talked about it before here in the treehouse, why you think it's so important and to work on being and becoming more self-aware.
I think that's an awesome topic, and I really love it for two reasons. Number one, I think in this relationship experience that we have on Wednesdays, it's easy to see this as something, well, I don't really get it in relationship, but I guess in my intimate relationship, I can see how that can work. But then you go, wait a second, how does that also translate into the people around me? Because all relationships have opportunities for growth and work and a lot of awareness building, because you and I have spent times together early in our relationship, and certainly as we've peopled our life over the last 30 years together, we've had different iterations of certain people that we go, oh my gosh, those are our people. We love hanging out with them. And we've also, I don't want to say that in a judgmental way, but we also have people come into our life, we're going, that's not necessarily our people. And we've had to be self-aware, number one, to admit it, and number two, to feel good about the fact that we really have clear boundaries around that.
Yeah, and I was thinking we could give examples so it's not so sort of hidden messages of what we're talking about.
Sure.
But I'll start with myself to make it easier rather than pointing fingers. But what I notice in myself, a few things, because I've recognized it in others, is that I was noticing when I interrupted you more. You're in the middle of saying something and then it triggers something in me, and either I don't want to forget to say it, so I have to say it right in that minute. So you're in the middle of the sentence and then I chime in. You don't finish your sentence, I have to get it out what I'm thinking, and so it's interrupting. And sometimes I'll notice a change in your face when I do it. You're talking and then you're like, really? Is she really interrupting me again? And just so you know, I think I'm working on it, and I love it because I like doing the work, and I like being more aware of how I am in relationship, because obviously if I do it with you, I'm doing with friends, I do it with our kids, and Dakota, I'm sorry, and Ellie, but I notice, I love that you call me out on that. So I have become a lot more aware of that. And we talked about this earlier. Honestly, you don't do it. You're not an interrupter. Just so, good job.
Well, I think in your own defense, and I think for a lot of us, not that you need defending, sweetheart, but isn't it interesting? I think for a lot of us who've grown really comfortable with people, and if you're in a relationship with an intimate partner, you get really comfortable, right? And we get so comfortable, we think we actually can finish a sentence because we know them so well. Oh, of course, I can go ahead and save them the trouble of finishing their sentence and go ahead and fill it in the rest for them. But you're right. It steals people's fire and it is disrespectful. And I know you don't do it on purpose, but there's a level of comfort. But also in that comfort, you have to also have that intimacy and that trust. So you can say, hey, you know what? That isn't working for me, or that's hard when you do that, or I'd love to be able to say what I'm feeling so you don't, step in and not let me complete what's really working on me these days. And I think the thing I really love about your willingness, and potentially this is something I celebrate in us, this hasn't been something where you and I could feel comfortable when we'd have these challenges. Sometimes if it wasn't done right, one of us would, not really be happy about it. We could get defensive about it. We could feel like it's not safe to talk it through it. And I think the thing that we're learning more and more is that hopefully in your intimate relationships or in all your great friendships, you've got the type of people in your life that you can feel safe doing the work. Because ultimately, we're all work in progress, as they say. And if we can't really feel comfortable and safe, the fact that we still have work to do. And I believe if you are here and you've got a heartbeat and you are alive on this planet, that means you have work to do. We all have work to do.
I totally wanted to interrupt you. But so you brought something up that I wanted to differentiate because you brought up finishing other people's sentences, which I feel is different than interrupting. It's the same but different.
Sure.
So I was noticing that I would interrupt you. Maybe it's a similar train of thought, but I don't know that I try to finish your sentence that often. But a friend in a former life of mine, I couldn't say a sentence without her finishing it. And it was really trippy because I was like, I would almost play around with it. Like, oh, I wonder if I talk about something else, if she's going to finish that sentence. And she was somebody we actually were doing a little work with. Like we were hiring her as a professional. And man, that got old really fast, really fast. So this is something to be aware of in your friendships, because it's a turnoff, and in your intimate relationships as well. Bringing it back to that, being self-aware, being present and mindful in your own thinking. And I know as I'm getting older, I'm like, oh gosh, I may forget what I want to say. So I want to say it before I lose it. But being conscientious enough to stop interrupting you in order to get that through.
I love all of this, honey. What would we think of practices that actually help to augment self-awareness?
I wrote some down.
Did you really? Okay, cool. Because I think for a lot of us, I'm sure you were thinking, oh my gosh, I do that with my bestie, I do that with my lover, my husband, my wife, I do it with my kids. This is something that's become so common, and there's actually a lot of research out there just on terms of the busyness of our lives and the inputs we have through technology, how we get so self-absorbed that we lose our self-awareness. It's interesting, right? We get so self-absorbed because we're so in the bubble of inputs and things coming in all the time. It's, internet and Instagram and Facebook, and then we get all our people around us, and life's moving fast, that you kind of go in this place where you're just so used to absorbing and thinking and absorbing and thinking that when you're actually with a human, and then you actually have work to do and exchanging and creating space and allowing for time to happen and all the things that happens in a decorum of a respectful relationship, it kind of gets sandwiched and it gets missed. So, hall pass for all of us. Our brains weren't wired to do it this way. So a lot of us are training our brains, and more importantly, our emotions, to not get triggered, to not get activated, to breathe and allow things to happen, and then respond with a level of love and a level of respect. And it's always work.
Yeah, totally. So I think some of the things that we can do, of course, number one, mindfulness, meditation, and breathing. So take a breath before you want to jump in and insert something. But even aside from when you're interacting with another person, like have that time to reflect on your own and take it into meditation, take it into a breathing practice, and just be with yourself and those thoughts. Like, well, what causes me to be that interrupter? Is it, as I said, like, oh, I'm afraid I'm going to forget? Is it because I think my point is more important, which just isn't true? But I think sitting with it, being mindful, and taking it into meditation is one great step.
I love that. And there's so much around the idea of actually having, taking more time between the stimulus and the response, right? And we know that in meditation or any mindfulness, even just a breathing practice, you literally give a couple micro moments of time in between the stimulus and how you will respond. And here's what's really interesting. Studies show that in this micro moment, which could be literally a fraction of a second, our brain moves from places where the ego is more connected and needing to talk or needing to respond or needing to defend, and it moves us into other, I call it more less defensive places in our brain. So this is such a practice, not just for communication, but how we think in ourselves, right? You get a thought come up and you're immediately on yourself for not being perfect or not doing things right. Any kind of breathing, mindfulness practice gives you that micro moment of self-awareness so your brain can go to a different region and respond more respectfully, more compassionately, with a level of love that you might not if you just kind of jump right in.
Yeah, that's awesome, honey. The other thing that I've asked of you is feedback, because sometimes I am not aware that I'm doing it. I'm not being self-aware. So ask your friends, ask your partner for feedback. I know my bestie out there has brought something, like it's come into her awareness that she's a huge interrupter, and her daughter brought it into her awareness. And so we have that kind of friendship and closeness that if I recognize that behavior, I'm going to call her out on it. And I have asked you in the past, hey, if I'm doing that, will you just let me know I'm doing that, because I may not be being mindful in that moment. And
How do I do? Am I doing okay with that?
well, I think so, but just by me recognizing that I'm doing it, it's helped me cut down on it a lot more. I hope.
I think so, because I'm trying to think if I'm good with that at all. I may or I may not be. But this topic is so good, especially in the times we're living in right now. And you and I often talk about this distinction between being triggered or activated. And isn't it an interesting time? And often this gets applies to politics or social media when people are sharing things, you're going, I can't believe they, then you go in your little place and then the triggers start happening. And sometimes we start saying stuff or get lost in things that we wish we didn't do. Well, there's a lot about this idea of being activated, where I think this idea of self-awareness is if this is something that you have a tendency towards doing, or it's something you want to be working on, really having, hopefully in a relationship with friends, family, partner, we can ask for that feedback. I love that you did that. Here's one of the things I think is such a beautiful part of our relationship, and I'm just going to love on you for a moment around this. You are always humble enough to ask. You are always humble enough to ask. And I think that is such an incredibly powerful trait. It's courageous to be that person who has enough self-awareness to say, hey, I'm not doing well on my own with this, and if I'm struggling, or you catch me in this, please help me lovingly remind me this is something I said I was working on, and you're going to help me by pointing it out to me.
Yeah, thank you. I was thinking of an example sort of outside of the house, outside of when you're just hanging out with your friends. And the biggie that comes up for me is when you go to a restaurant or when you go out to eat. You're in public, whether you're with a friend, a family member. We probably all know somebody who it's just not really fun to go out to eat or dine with them because of how they're treating the wait staff. I'm getting all worked up now because I can put myself in that moment, but it really comes to a lack of self-awareness when the person that you're with, like, you're so easy and kind to when we're at restaurants, and you're overly grateful and you always call the server by their name. But those people who are just, what I can't even put it into words, but it's like when it's rude and it's like the snapping of the fingers, like, hey, over here. And don't do that. Don't be that person. And it really comes down to a lack of self-awareness of who you are being in that moment. And it's just not an attractive quality. So whether you're with your partner, you're with a friend or an acquaintance, a business situation, you're not going to score any points by being that person in the public setting and in a service industry. Just be an active listener, be compassionate, take a breath before you start snapping your fingers or you start just kind of putting energy where energy doesn't belong.
Yeah. Well, back in alignment with that idea of being activated versus triggered,
Yeah.
I think that, really, if we were to walk away with some key points for today, I think this idea of activation is really, really important for all of us to remember, and not certainly just in intimate relationships, but you made a point, sweetheart, about how it is that there are certain types of emotions that are very contagious. And there's been studies on, being disrespectful and what's the contagion around that, or being mean, or dark energy, and how does that become contagious? Well, kindness, and interesting enough, there's been a lot of research out there. When we are in a place where we're expressing kindness, our self-awareness is saying, hey, I want to influence somebody. I want to see if I can actually help someone to move in a more positive, kind direction. Studies show that when you are exercising that self-awareness of kindness, and not in a way that's just kind of like you're just being so kind and it's almost like, really, that's so inauthentic, but true kindness, eye contact, paying attention, not interrupting, I like to say smiling with your eyes when you're listening. Those are great, great tactics to actually help to augment kindness. And interesting enough, when that happens, serotonin levels will rise up. And when serotonin levels rise, that is one of the most contagious chemicals that's happening. So we become publicly attractive. We become publicly activating. And I think in the world as it is right now, we look around and go, what can I do to help bring more positive energy? What can I do in my relationship? We need to want things to improve. We need to want things to be better. We need to want that we actually have a way in which we can impact other human beings. And one of the things that I think that you and I have been really clear about in our lives, and really it's been part of our spiritual work, honey, is really thinking about the version of ourselves when we leave the house. Who is the version that we want to be? When we actually walked into our kids' bedrooms when our kids were still home, when they were little, what kind of parent do we want to walk in and be? The self-awareness of that opening the door and walking into your kid's room, or walking into the bedroom where your partner is, or walking into a store, taking that moment and think about the activation that you want to bring into that environment that you're walking into. Because if it's kind to yourself, it's going to be kind to everyone around you. And you will literally become a contagion maker that literally impacts all the people you love, people you're close to, and people you don't even know who they are, but could use that level of energetic to shift their disposition.
Yep, fantastic. So that's it. That's what I wanted to talk about today. And if you have questions, feedback, reach out to us. We'd love to chat more with you about it. And as always, thank you for watching and listening today.
Can I say one thing before we go?
Of course.
This is a self-awareness piece. We promised we would do this on Wednesdays. I tell you, we're done Wednesday afternoon, and I am immediately going, I can't wait for next Wednesday. I love doing this with you, honey. I know it's really something that we thought long and hard about before we started doing this. Thank you for taking this trust walk with me. It means the world to me, and I hope you all are feeling the love that we have for you for tuning in. We'll see you next Wednesday. Much love.
Much love.
All blessings.
Take care.
Bye.